years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost of housing, which has doubled. But today, the Parliamentary Budget Officer released a damning report that showed that after the Prime Minister promised he would eliminate chronic homelessness, it's actually gone up 38%, and the number of people living in unsheltered locations is up 88%. This after he spent $500 million on homelessness programs. So if it costs $500 million for him to drive up homelessness, how much would it cost to drive it down?
Wow. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, whether it's the pandemic, whether it was global inflation, whether it was international economic situations, we've seen more and more Canadians suffering, including from the opioid and toxic drug epidemic that the Leader of the Opposition continues to attack and vilify. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we've invested billions in countering homelessness, and we're going to continue to invest in eliminating encampments and supporting Canadians and communities, in vulnerable communities across the country. The Leader of the Opposition solution is to do less to fight homelessness, to invest less in vulnerable people. That's what he's doing when he votes against our current budget.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Again, he brags about his billions in spending. Mr. Speaker, people can't live in billions. They live in homes, and his billions build bureaucracies that block those homes. In 2015, there were 284 homeless people in Halifax. Now, there's 1,211. Wow. There are over 30 homeless encampments in Halifax alone. 10 years ago, there were 3,000 Quebecers who were homeless. Now it's 10,000. Why is it that the more he spends, the worse things get?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government has chosen to invest to support Canadians through difficult times. We saw it through the pandemic, where we stepped up to put money in Canadians' pockets, money in community organizations, money in businesses and restaurants, in mom-and-pop shops right across the country, and we came out of it stronger economically. We restored full employment faster than the United States. We know that investing when people need supports is the right way to build for the future. Confident countries invest in themselves. What the Leader of the Opposition is proposing is austerity and cuts to programs at exactly the time that Canadians need them.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Canadians are already living through austerity, according to a PBO report. It has shown that since the Prime Minister promised to eliminate homelessness, it has increased by 38%. The number of homeless people in Quebec has risen from 3,000 to 10,000, Mr. Speaker. Yes, true, he's spending more money, that he's making everything more expensive. But when will he recognize that big government in Ottawa will never end homelessness? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, no one in this country thinks that a Conservative government that will cut and offer austerity will help fight homelessness in our country. That's not how things work. It takes investment.
You're not how things
in
work.
Housing that is affordable. It takes investment in programs to support people who are homeless. It takes investment in programs based on compassion and data to fight drug issues. This is the investment that is necessary. But he's just proposing cuts and austerity while Canadians are suffering. But we are here to invest in vulnerable communities. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Devastating reports in one day demonstrate the NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost. First, we had Food Banks Canada and the Salvation Army that say record numbers are forced to go to food banks, that over half of people are worse off than they were a year ago. And now the PBO says there is more homelessness. There's more homelessness and hunger. He's got three explanations. One, he can blame the rest of the world for his mistakes. Two, he can promise more of the spending that caused the problem. Or three, he can own up and admit that he caused the misery Canadians are living.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, while the Conservative leader likes to going around saying Canada is broken, we choose instead to invest in Canadians, invest in supporting food banks, invest in community organizations that are on the front lines of supporting vulnerable Canadians, investing in the kinds of programs that are lifting Canadians up, like the 2 million vulnerable seniors who are now accessing health care, dental care for the first time. 100,000 people in just 22 days have gotten dental care when the Conservative Party has consistently voted against it and indeed tried to block it both in this House and across the country. We will continue to be there for Canadians.
The honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Ireland, Spain and Norway announced that they will soon recognize the State of Palestine. This is a crucial step towards peace and justice for Palestinians and Israelis. But Canada is missing in action. In February, New Democrats asked this government to recognize the State of Palestine. They refused, and they turned their backs on Palestinians and Israelis who are looking for peace and justice in their region. The Prime Minister can take a stand today. Will he join with the consensus of international community and recognize the State of Palestine?
Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we urgently need to build a credible path towards lasting peace. We oppose efforts by the Netanyahu government to reject a two-state solution. At the same time, Hamas, a terrorist group, currently controls areas in Gaza and has not laid down its arms or released its hostages. We are prepared to recognize the State of Palestine at the right time, not necessarily as the last step along the path. We were pleased to be able to support the NDP motion of a number of months ago. We will continue to work forward on promoting peace and working towards stability in the Middle East.
The honourable member from Nunavut.
Last week, I met with the Tumikulut Saipakivik daycare in Iqaluit, a daycare that provides culturally appropriate care in Inuktitut. Because of a lack of funding, they are on the verge of closing. In 2022, the Liberals promised millions of dollars to Nunavut daycare. The funding is taking too long to make its way to Tumikulut Saipakivik daycare. Will the Liberals ensure Tumikulut does not fall through the cracks and get the urgent funding it needs to stay open?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Investing in early learning and child care right across the country that is affordable, that is high quality, and that is available for families is one of the cornerstones of this government's policy of the past few years. We've worked closely with provinces and territories to make sure that money is delivered on the ground where it is needed the most. I will follow up on this particular case and make sure that the government of Nunavut is passing through the money and is accessing all the funds necessary so that child care in the north and indeed right across the country continues to be delivered as the social program and economic program that it is.
The honourable member from Vancouver Centre.
Mr. Speaker, as a family doctor who delivered close to 500 babies, I am concerned about access to reproductive choice. Claiming to support reproductive choice is not enough. We must pass legislation that makes it fully accessible to all. The Pharmacare Act is a start. It will provide free contraception to over 9 million patients. Unfortunately, our Conservative colleagues oppose it. They also oppose access to safe abortion. Will the Prime Minister reaffirm his government's promise to defend a woman's reproductive rights in spite of the opposition's efforts to deny it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for Vancouver Centre for her decades of leadership. We will always support a woman's right to access reproductive health care, both in our words and in our policy. The Leader of the Opposition pretends to be pro-choice, but supports his Conservative caucus members tabling anti-abortion legislation. He cannot have it both ways. If the opposition leader truly believed in the right to choose, he'd condemn any effort to restrict reproductive choice and freedom, including from within his own caucus.
Hear, hear. Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 9 years of this Prime Minister, The cost of housing has doubled because of his inflationist spending and the bureaucracy that he's funding, which is preventing construction. In Le Soleil today, we learned that those who have not yet found a home for the coming year are panicking. And there's a major risk that many people will be forced to camp this summer because they can't find a home. Is this Prime Minister's plan, after doubling the cost of housing, to provide tents to people who are going to have to go camping because they can't find a home? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Well, I'm happy to be able to talk about our plan, which assures fairness for every generation. Our housing plan will build 3.87 million new housing units across the country by cutting bureaucracy, by changing zoning, and by lowering construction costs, and by using public land. We are going to bring back the dream of access to a home for young Canadians by helping them save money tax-free and by allowing renters to use their history when asking for a mortgage. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. The inflation that is hurting Canadians is the result of the inflationist and centralizing spending of this Prime Minister. No surprise. What's surprising is that the Bloc voted for $500 billion of that spending. And, you know, this isn't the money that's already in the main estimates. This is money that's doubling fees for consultants, for example, including money for a Arrive scam. Does the Bloc Liberal government realize that more money for the federal government means less money for Quebecers? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see the Conservative leader completely ignoring facts and data in all of the rhetorical arguments that he's putting forward. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is that the inflation, which has hit the entire planet, hurt Canada less than many other countries, and now over the last 4 months, inflation has gone down because of the investments and because of the sound, responsible financial management of our government. We will continue to be there to invest in Canadians while lowering inflation. That's what he doesn't understand.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, inflation in housing is worse in Canada than in any other G7 country. It's the second worst of the 40 OECD countries. But the question was about inflationary spending and centralizing spending that the Bloc continues to vote for. The Bloc Québécois has become a socialist party that wants to increase the size of the government. But they're focused on the federal government. So that means a bigger federal state and less autonomy and money for Quebecers. And why is it only the Conservatives who are defending Quebecers?
Premier Minister.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Now, Mr. Speaker, we all remember what these Conservatives do when it comes to Quebec. We saw the cuts to social health services and healthcare. We saw the cuts in the health transfer. We saw the cuts to arts and culture, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives are standing up today to attack the Bloc Québécois for not properly defending Quebec. Well, that's ridiculous, Mr. Speaker. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is that the Bloc is to defend Quebecers. They do it less well than the federal government can do it, but the attacks from the Conservatives against Quebecers are a bit ridiculous, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Well, here. The Liberal Bloc Party. A beautiful coalition, a beautiful coalition. Now the Prime Minister, the so-called Federalist Prime Minister, says that the Bloc defends Quebecers. What? What? And the Bloc is voting for centralizing spending here in Ottawa. What? What is going on here? Everything is confused, Mr. Speaker. Isn't it time to forget this ridiculous coalition and replace it with a Conservative government that has a lot of common sense?
Le très honorable Premier
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Apparently, unlike the leader of the Conservatives, I believe fundamentally that every member in this House is there to defend the interests of the people who elected them. That is our individual responsibility and collective responsibility. Every person here in this House is doing that. Yes, people know very well that I disagree with the ultimate goal of the Bloc Québécois, but at the same time, we can certainly find moments where we can work together with respect to protect the French language, to create economic growth in Quebec. We are there to work together, not to play political games and to just attack everyone. That's what the Conservatives are here to do.